Okay, let's compare the two systems, the somatic uh, division of the peripheral nervous system and the visceral division of the peripheral nervous system, which is the autonomic nervous system. Got it? Okay, I know you're familiar with this because, hey, I'm missing one because you just studied this. Okay, so in here, remember, this is how the somatic nervous system works. How do I know it's somatic? Well, I can see skeletal muscles being innervated in here. So we have, let's explain only the motor branch. We have the motor neuron are located on the anterior gray horn of the spinal cord. The fibers of these neurons or axons, they group together and form the, remember, the anterior or ventral root. And these fibers are going to receive the fibers of the dorsal root ganglia or fuse together to form the spinal nerves, remember? And the thing is that these motor fibers goes straight to innervate the muscle. One motor neuron, one effector. In between, there's nothing else, okay? That's the simple somatic nervous system. What happened to this, the same somatic nervous system on a thoracic segment? Remember, I said that in the thoracic segment of the spinal cord, we have the anterior and posterior gray horn, like in any other segments, but in here we have additionally the lateral gray horn, okay? So in these segments, for example, I can see, and this is only another example of the same thing, the motor neuron, somatic motor neuron located on the anterior gray horn of the spinal cord. The fibers, the motor fiber exits through the ventral root and form the spinal nerve. These are heavy myelinated axons. They're very thick, so the information in here travels really fast to reach the target organ. In this case, it looks like, I don't know what muscle is that one. At the beginning, it looks like pectoralis. Any respiratory muscle, a skeletal muscle in there, okay? Doesn't look like an intercostal. Okay, that's it. And remember that we explained this synapse, which is the neuromuscular junction, the synapse between the end of this axon and the muscle cell, the skeletal muscle cell, and how the neuron releases acetylcholine, which is the neurotransmitter that interacts with the acetylcholine of the receptors on the skeletal muscle tissue, and this stimulates the muscle to contract. Ready? Okay, this is the somatic nervous system. This is previous chapter, chapter 14. In this chapter, there's some tweaks to this, okay? It's a little different, not too much, I promise. Let's get maybe red in here. Okay, that's your somatic neuron. In here, the visceral motor neuron is located on the ventral horn, in the lateral horn of the gray matter in the spinal cord. So in the lateral gray horn, right here. Easy, right? It's going to follow, these are motor neurons, so it's going to follow the same motor motor roots or anterior or ventral roots of the spinal cord. These fibers exit the spinal cord, we can see them here, see? And they're going to reach a target organ. But remember, the target organs of the autonomic nervous system are not skeletal muscles, are smooth cardiac muscle tissue or glands, okay? So let's see how this motor fiber is going to reach those organs. Well, first of all, these fibers are going to reach another neuron. They're going to synapse with a second neuron in here and in here, okay? This neuron, or the clusters of these neurons, form another type of ganglia. Now, these are not dorsal root ganglia. They're not sensory ganglia. They're motor ganglia. They're ganglia with motor neurons the cell body of motor neurons are going to send the motor command for these target organs to contract, okay? So far, see that we have described one neuron in here in the central nervous system and a second neuron in here in the peripheral nervous system, okay? In a ganglia. They can be either close or not that close from the target organ, okay? And in here, there's of course a synapse between this first neuron and the second neuron. So how do you think we can call this neuron, the first one, which is this one? This is called, because it's before the synapse, we're going to call it presynaptic neuron. These fibers, this is the neuron located on the central nervous system, okay? The fibers, the axons of these neurons exit the central nervous system, and they're going to be called because they're before the ganglia, we're going to call it preganglionic fibers. Okay? Now, in the ganglia, we're going to see, remember, it's a cluster of cell bodies. So it's a second neuron, right? So we're going to call this neuron ganglionic neurons because they are in the ganglia. How convenient, right? So ganglionic neurons. And these one are in the peripheral nervous system. Now, the axons of these ganglionic neurons, the ones that are going to reach the effector or the target organ, in here we have another one, I'll tell you that later. We're going to call these axons, since they are after the ganglia, we're going to call it post-ganglionic, ganglionic fibers. Okay, so 4 elements, 2 neurons, okay, 4 elements, 1 system. Okay, so we have 2 neurons, which is the this is just an enlargement of this, okay, we're zooming in here. So the first neuron, we're going to call it preganglionic neuron. As you can see, is located on the central nervous system. The second neuron is called ganglionic neuron because it's located on the ganglia. The ganglia can be in here, like midway, or it can be very close. You see it here? Actually within the target organ or in the wall of the target organ. In this case, the target organ is the heart. Now, preganglionic fibers, we have the axons, okay? All the group of axons or of these neurons form the preganglionic fibers because they are located before the ganglia. And the axons of these ganglionic neurons, because they are located after the ganglia, we're going to call it post-ganglionic fibers, okay? And they're going to reach the target organ. Now, later, we're going to describe a little bit more in detail when we describe the divisions, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic division. But so far, this is what I want you to know. Now, one important difference in here. As you can see, and I told you before, the axons, the nerves, the fibers, the motor fibers in the somatic nervous system are heavily myelinated. They're thick myelinated axons. Remember, the myelin, what it does is speed the action potential, right? So the information travels from here to here in less than 1 nanosecond, okay? Look at the axons in here. The axons of the preganglionic neurons are myelinated, but they're very thin, okay? And the axons of the ganglionic neurons are non-myelinated. What is this telling you? That the conduction of, or the transmission of the action potential of the information from the central nervous system to the target organ is slow. It takes some time to get there, okay? Another difference that we are going to see are the type of neurotransmitters involved in the synapse. Okay, we already know that acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter released in somatic synapses, and it happens to be the same in the preganglionic, or released by the preganglionic neurons. We'll see later what happens with the other neurons. Okay, so in summary, we have said that we have two motor neurons in the autonomic nervous system, right? One is the preganglionic neuron located on the central nervous system, and the axons of this motor neuron, let's put here the axons that actually are going to synapse with this ganglionic neuron. These axons are called preganglionic fibers, right? And that we have a second type of neuron, okay, located in a ganglia, and they're called ganglionic neuron, a second neuron. The fibers or the axons of these neurons are called, since are after the ganglia, they're called postganglionic fibers, and they are going to reach the target organ. What can be the target organ? It can be the heart, it can be the smooth muscle tissue, or it can be a gland. I don't have a drawing for the gland. Okay? So it's a system of two neurons. We said that these fibers, the preganglionic fibers, are thinly myelinated, and the postganglionic fibers are non-myelinated. So the conduction in here is very slow. And we said also, please remember that these ganglia in here are totally different from the dorsal root ganglia. On the dorsal root ganglia described, where all the sensory information reaches or gets in, right, where the sensory neuron is located, are sensory ganglia. These ganglionic neurons are motor, these ganglionic or ganglia are motor ganglia, okay, the ones on the autonomic nervous system. Now, in the next video, we are going to just introduce the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic divisions. And that's it. See you later. Alligators.